I was 7 when I heard my aunt whisper it to my mother. "Are you sure you want to include Emma in the Christmas card this year? Those teeth, that haircut. It might be better to just use Sarah's solo shot." My mother didn't disagree. I stood frozen behind the kitchen door, clutching the gingerbread cookie I'd snuck in to grab, as my own family debated whether I was too ugly for our annual Christmas card. That was 20 years ago, in our suburban Minnesota home, where appearances mattered more than truth. The Christmas card never made it to print that year, not because they changed their minds about me, but because of what happened at our family's legendary Christmas Eve party. What unfolded that night would tear our picture-perfect family facade apart and reveal secrets my parents had kept buried since before I was born. Secrets that would eventually set me free. Growing up in Edina, Minnesota, meant living in what locals call the bubble, a pristine suburb where success wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. My mother, Catherine Montgomery Pierce, came from old Minneapolis money and reminded everyone of it at every opportunity. She chaired 3 charity boards, maintained a meticulous home, and treated her daughters like accessories that needed to match her seasonal wardrobe. My father, Thomas Pierce, was the chief surgeon at Fairview Hospital, respected, admired, and completely absent. When he wasn't saving lives, he was golfing at the country club or working late. The silent agreement in our house was that his absence was the price we paid for our privilege. Then there was my older sister Sarah, golden-haired, straight-A student Sarah with her perfect teeth and natural grace. At 13, she was everything I wasn't, poised, pretty, and perpetually pleasing to our mother. I was the disappointment. Gangly, with unruly brown hair, crooked teeth awaiting braces, and a stubborn streak that my mother called deliberately difficult. "Emma, please try to sit like a lady," Mother would sigh at Sunday dinners at Grandma Montgomery's Victorian house in Summit Avenue. "Look at your sister." These comparisons formed the backdrop of my childhood, as regular as the changing Minnesota seasons. The summer I turned 6, Mother enrolled us in the Lake Minnetonka Yacht Club's annual children's regatta. Sarah, naturally, took to sailing like she'd been born on water. I capsized my optimist within 10 minutes. When they fished me out, soaking and crying, Mother didn't rush to comfort me. Instead, she stood at the dock's edge, lips pressed into a thin line, and said loudly enough for the Andersons and Johnsons to hear, "Some people simply aren't meant for certain things, Emma." That winter brought the Edina Elementary School holiday pageant. I'd been practicing my one line as Shepherd 3 for weeks. We have traveled far to see the child. When the moment came, stage fright struck. I stood mute, paralyzed under the bright lights as parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mrs. Larson, my kindly teacher, tried prompting me. Nothing came out. Eventually, Shepherd 4 jumped in with his line. In the car after, Mother said, "I don't understand why you insist on embarrassing us, Emma. It was one simple line." But worse than these public humiliations were the private ones. The way Mother would sigh when I entered a room. How she'd absently fix my hair or clothing mid-conversation, as if I couldn't be seen in my current state. The shopping trips where nothing ever looked quite right on me, while Sarah's dressing room visits ended with Mother's approving smile and the swipe of her credit card. Despite all this, every Christmas, our family maintained the grand tradition of the Montgomery Pierce Christmas Eve party, an elaborate affair at our home where Minneapolis society gathered to admire our 15-foot tree, imported ornaments, and Mother's famous cranberry punch. The highlight was always the unveiling of our Christmas card, professionally photographed and artfully displayed on easels throughout the house. These cards weren't just holiday greetings, they were statements, testaments to our family's perfection. Each year brought a new theme: Winter Wonderland with us in coordinating cream cashmere on a sleigh, Nutcracker Dreams, where Sarah and I wore matching velvet dresses with satin sashes. Mother spent months planning these productions, and now, at 7, I'd overheard the truth. I was the flaw in the perfect picture. What I didn't know then was that these Christmas cards held more significance than even Mother realized. They were covering for something, a family secret so deeply buried that it had shaped our lives without us knowing. A secret that involved a woman named Diane Lawson, whose name I found scribbled on the back of an old photograph hidden in Father's desk drawer, and a cabin in northern Minnesota that our family owned but never visited. December in Minnesota means serious business, the kind of cold that makes your lungs ache when you breathe. That Christmas season, our house on Minnehaha Boulevard had transformed into Mother's winter showcase. Garlands wrapped every banister, poinsettias flanked doorways, and hand-painted ornaments from Austria adorned our massive spruce. The air smelled of pine, cinnamon, and Mother's anxiety. "Emma, for heaven's sake, stop fidgeting with your dress," Mother hissed as she adjusted the velvet bow at my waist for the 3rd time. We were having our final fitting for the Christmas card photo shoot scheduled for the following day. Sarah stood perfectly still as the seamstress pinned her identical dress, emerald green velvet with white lace collar, the Montgomery family tartan as a sash. "It itches," I complained. "Beauty requires sacrifice," Mother replied automatically. Her phone rang, the photographer calling to confirm tomorrow's appointment. I watched her face change as she listened. "What do you mean you're booked? We've had this appointment for months." Her voice rose sharply. "The cards need to be printed and mailed in time for the party." The photographer had double booked and chosen the governor's family over ours. Mother was livid, her carefully constructed timeline crumbling. "We'll have to use Jameson Photography instead," she said, already dialing. "Their work isn't nearly as refined, but we have no choice." That evening, I snuck into Father's study, a forbidden kingdom of leather and mahogany. I was searching for the candy he kept hidden in his desk drawer when I found it, a worn photograph of a young woman with kind eyes and a familiar smile, holding a baby. On the back was written, "Diane and Emma, Leech Lake, 1990. My heart stopped. Emma, my name, but I was born in 1993, not 1990. And who was Diane? The next day, as we posed stiffly before the replacement photographer, I couldn't stop thinking about the photograph. Mother grew increasingly frustrated with me. "Emma, please try to look natural. Stop squinting. Straighten your shoulders." When the photographer suggested we take a break, I overheard him tell his assistant, "The older girl photographs like a dream, but the little one, there's only so much retouching can do." That night, I crept back into Father's study and searched more thoroughly. In a locked drawer that opened with the letter opener, I found legal documents with the names Thomas Pierce, Diane Lawson, and custody arrangements for minor child Emma Rose Lawson. My stomach knotted as I read further. Father had another family, or at least he used to. The week before the Christmas Eve party passed in a blur of preparations and revelations. I discovered that Father had been married before to Diane Lawson from Bemidji. They had a daughter, me, before Diane died in a car accident when I was just 3 months old. Father had brought me into his new marriage with Mother, who had agreed to raise me as her own. Sarah was their biological child. I wasn't Catherine Montgomery Pierce's daughter at all. Suddenly, everything made sense. Mother's constant disappointment, the subtle difference in how she treated Sarah and me, the lack of baby pictures before my 3rd birthday. I wasn't failing to live up to the Montgomery legacy. I had never been part of it. The day before the party, the finished Christmas cards arrived. Mother opened the box at the kitchen island, her face falling as she flipped through them. "These simply won't do," she declared. "The lighting is all wrong, and Emma looks, well, we can't send these." "What's wrong with them?" I asked quietly, peering over the counter. "Nothing you need to worry about, dear," she said dismissively. "We'll just have to go without cards this year. I'll tell everyone the printer made a terrible mistake." Later, I found one of the rejected cards in the trash. In it, Sarah looked angelic, Mother poised, and Father handsome, if distant. I looked like myself. Not ugly, just different. I had Diane Lawson's eyes and smile, a fact that must have haunted Mother every day for 7 years. The morning of the Christmas Eve party, tension in our house reached fever pitch. Mother snapped at the caterers, rearranged flower displays obsessively, and barely acknowledged my existence. Sarah was assigned to greet guests, her rehearsed welcome speech perfected. I was told to stay upstairs until called down for the family appearance at 8 p.m. sharp. But as I sat alone in my bedroom, running my fingers over the hidden photograph of my real mother, something shifted inside me. A new feeling took root. Not quite anger, not quite courage, but a certainty that the truth mattered more than Mother's perfect facade. When the doorbell began ringing at 7 p.m., I made my decision. I changed out of the itchy velvet dress into my favorite corduroys and Minnesota twin sweatshirt. I tucked the photograph of Diane into my pocket, and I waited for the perfect moment to bring the Montgomery Pierce Christmas tradition crashing down. By 8 o'clock, our house buzzed with Minneapolis elite. Judges in bow ties, surgeons and their Botoxed wives, the mayor and his entourage. Crystal glasses clinked, fake laughter echoed off vaulted ceilings, and Mother floated through it all, the perfect hostess in her red silk gown. "Where is Emma?" I heard her whisper tensely to our housekeeper, Mrs. Gunderson. "She needs to be downstairs now." "Haven't seen her, ma'am," Mrs. Gunderson replied. "Shall I check upstairs?" I watched this exchange from my hiding spot behind the massive Christmas tree, still unnoticed in my casual clothes. Father stood by the fireplace, nodding absently as Judge Peterson droned on about his latest ruling. Sarah played the piano, her fingers dancing across the keys as admirers gathered around. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mother's voice suddenly rang out, commanding attention. While we've had a small printing mishap with our traditional Christmas cards this year, we're delighted to have you all here to celebrate the season with the Pierce family. Small murmurs of disappointment rippled through the crowd. The unveiling of the Montgomery Pierce Christmas card had become something of a local legend. However, Mother continued with a practiced smile, we do have a special musical performance prepared. Sarah will be playing Tchaikovsky's Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy, followed by a recitation of The Night Before Christmas. That was my cue, the moment I was supposed to emerge in my velvet dress and recite the poem while Sarah played softly in the background. Instead, I stepped out from behind the tree in my twin sweatshirt, clutching Diane's photograph. The room didn't immediately notice me, but Mother did. Her smile froze, eyes widening in horror. "Emma, what on earth?" she began, her voice low and dangerous. I walked to the center of the room, where the easel that should have held this year's Christmas card stood empty. "I know why the Christmas cards didn't get printed this year," I announced, my voice small but steady in the suddenly quiet room. "It's because I'm not pretty enough, because I don't look like a Montgomery." Uncomfortable glances were exchanged. Father set down his scotch glass. "And there's a reason for that," I continued, holding up the photograph. "This is my real mother. Her name was Diane Lawson, and she died when I was a baby. I'm not really a Montgomery Pierce. I'm a Lawson Pierce." The silence was absolute. Mother's face had drained of all color, her knuckles white around her champagne flute. "Emma." "That's enough," Father finally said, stepping forward. But there was something different in his face. Not anger, but a complex mixture of shame and relief. "No, it's not enough," I replied, surprising myself with my courage. "Everyone here thinks we're the perfect family, but we're not. I found the papers in your desk. I know Mother agreed to adopt me after Diane died, but she never really wanted me, did she? That's why I'm never good enough. That's why I'm too ugly for the Christmas card." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sarah had stopped playing, her hands frozen above the keys. Mother stepped forward, her voice ice. "Emma, you will go to your room immediately. We will discuss this private family matter later." "It's not private if you make me feel awful about it every day," I shot back, tears now streaming down my face. "You compare me to Sarah constantly. You're embarrassed by me. You wish I wasn't here." "That is absolutely untrue," Mother said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Then why did you tell Aunt Margaret I was too ugly for the Christmas card?" I demanded. "I heard you in the kitchen. You didn't even defend me." The room collectively inhaled. Aunt Margaret, standing near the punch bowl, turned crimson. Father moved toward me, kneeling to meet my eyes. "Emma, I'm so sorry you found out this way. We were going to tell you when you were older. Diane was a wonderful woman, and she loved you very much." "Why don't we have pictures of her in our house?" I asked. "Why do we never talk about her? Why do we have a cabin on Leech Lake that we never visit?" Mother's champagne flute slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. No one moved to clean it up. "Because Catherine insisted," Father said quietly, his words meant for me but heard by everyone. "It was her condition for raising you as her own, that we never speak of Diane, never acknowledge that life." I looked at Mother, whose perfect facade had completely crumbled. In that moment, I saw not the intimidating figure who had loomed over my childhood, but a frightened, insecure woman. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the grand staircase, the photograph of Diane still clutched in my hand. As I climbed the steps, I heard the whispers begin, saw guests reaching for their coats, watched Father's colleagues awkwardly setting down their drinks. The Montgomery Pierce Christmas Eve party was over, and so was the lie I had lived for 7 years. The days after Christmas passed in uncomfortable silence. Gifts remained unwrapped under the tree. Mother retreated to her bedroom with migraines. Father took long drives alone. Sarah, caught in the middle, brought me hot chocolate and sat on my bed, trying to process the revelation herself. "I always knew we looked different," she said, studying my face. "But Mom told me it was because you took after Dad's side of the family. Are you mad at me?" I asked, bracing for rejection. She thought for a moment. "No, I'm mad they lied to both of us." On New Year's Eve, instead of attending the Andersons' annual gala, Father knocked on my bedroom door. "Get dressed, Emma. We're taking a drive." We headed north on I-94, then Highway 371, the Minnesota winter landscape blurring past my window. Father drove silently for nearly 3 hours before turning onto a snow-covered private road that wound through pine forests. "Where are we going?" I finally asked. "Leech Lake. To the cabin." The cabin was a modest A-frame, nestled against the frozen shoreline, nothing like our sprawling Edina home. Inside, everything was preserved exactly as it had been years ago. Fishing gear by the door, quilts draped over worn furniture, photographs covering the walls. And there she was, Diane, smiling from every frame. Diane and Father on their wedding day, Diane pregnant, hands cradling her belly, Diane holding newborn me, exhausted but radiant. "Your mother loved this place," Father said, his voice thick. "She grew up in Bemidji, fished these waters with her father. When we met in medical school, this was where she brought me first, not to meet her parents, but to show me her lake." I moved through the cabin, touching everything, absorbing the evidence of the woman who gave me life. On the mantel sat a small wooden box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me. "She wrote these during her pregnancy," Father explained. "One letter for each birthday until you turned 18. After the accident, I couldn't bear to read them. I should have given them to you." I opened the one marked for Emma's 7th birthday with trembling hands. "My darling girl, today you are 7, old enough to lose teeth, ride a bike without training wheels, and ask questions about the world that might stump your father. He's brilliant, but flummoxed by simple things. I wonder if your hair is still wild in the mornings, if you still scrunch your nose when you concentrate, if you've discovered books yet. I was a reader at your age, lost in stories about brave girls having adventures. I hope you know that you are perfectly, wonderfully made. There will be people who try to change you, who will suggest improvements, who will make you question if you're enough. Don't listen. You come from generations of strong northern Minnesota women who value character over appearance, kindness over conformity. I wish I could see you blow out your candles today. Know that somewhere I am celebrating you. All my love, Mom. I clutched the letter to my chest, finally mourning the mother I never knew I'd lost. We stayed at the cabin for 3 days. Father told me everything. How he and Diane met as medical students, their whirlwind romance, their plans for a family practice in Bemidji, how the accident happened on an icy road as Diane drove back from buying formula, how he, destroyed by grief, returned to Minneapolis, where his old girlfriend, Catherine Montgomery, offered stability, social standing, and a mother for his infant daughter. She agreed to adopt you legally, to raise you as her own, he explained. But her condition was that we never speak of Diane, never visit the cabin, never acknowledge that life. She wanted a fresh start. I was broken, Emma. I took the easy way out. Did she ever love me? I asked. Father paused. She tried, in her way, but Catherine has always struggled with anything she perceives as imperfect, including herself. When we returned to Adina, something had fundamentally shifted. Mother emerged from her bedroom, oddly subdued. Over dinner, Father announced, Emma and I visited the cabin at Leech Lake. Mother's fork clattered against her plate. I see. We're going to renovate it this spring, he continued. Emma should know that part of her heritage. And what will people say? Mother asked, her old concern surfacing. They already know, Catherine, Father said firmly, and frankly, I don't care anymore. The most surprising conversation came later that week. Mother knocked on my bedroom door, something she rarely did. May I come in? She asked, strangely hesitant. She sat primly on the edge of my bed, hands folded in her lap. I've been speaking with Dr. Bennett, she said, referring to her therapist, about my difficulties with you. I waited, unsure where this was heading. I've never been a particularly maternal person, she continued. Sarah was easier because she's more like me. When your father brought you home, this tiny baby who looked nothing like me, who reminded him of someone else he loved, she trailed off. I wasn't equipped to handle those feelings. Instead of working through them, I projected them onto you. It wasn't exactly an apology, but from Mother, it was monumental. I would like to try again, she said carefully. Not as your mother, perhaps that ship has sailed, but as family of some kind. That spring brought changes no one could have predicted. Father reduced his hours at the hospital to renovate the cabin. Mother channeled her organizational energy into researching her family history, discovering, to everyone's surprise, that her great-grandmother had been a Leech Lake Ojibwe woman whose existence had been carefully erased from the Montgomery family narrative. It seems we both have northern Minnesota in our blood, she told me one afternoon, almost smiling. Sarah and I grew closer, united by the shared experience of discovering our family wasn't what we thought. She accompanied me to the cabin that summer, learning to fish and canoe, reading Diane's letters alongside me. The Christmas after I turned 8, we did something revolutionary. We took an honest Christmas card photo. No matching outfits, no professional photographer. Just the 4 of us at the cabin, in flannel and jeans, with fishing rods and genuine smiles. The back of the card read, "From our imperfect family to yours." And tucked inside each one was a small photograph of Diane, finally acknowledged as part of our story. 20 years later, I still have all of Diane's letters. They guided me through childhood, adolescence, and into adulthood with her wisdom and unconditional love. The cabin on Leech Lake became my sanctuary, the place where I felt most connected to both my past and my future. Mother and I never developed the warm relationship some might have hoped for, but we found a respectful understanding. She taught me about resilience and reinvention, how it's never too late to face uncomfortable truths. Father became the dad Diane had believed he could be, present, engaged, and unafraid of emotion. Last month, I brought my own daughter to the cabin for the first time. I named her Diane, of course. As she splashed along the shoreline where my mother once stood, I realized that sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most authentic lives. That Christmas card never made it to print, but the truth it forced into the open gave me something far more valuable than a perfect image. It gave me my real story. If you're holding on to family secrets or living behind a carefully constructed facade, I hope you find the courage to embrace your authentic self. Sometimes the very things we're most ashamed of become our greatest strengths when brought into the light. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more about navigating complex family dynamics and finding your truth. Leave a comment sharing your own experience with family secrets or the moment you realized perfection isn't what it seems. Until next time, remember that being too ugly for someone else's picture might just mean you belong in a different, more beautiful frame.